Well, today your article is titled Infidelity Recovery, Emotional Restitution.
Mm.
So, what inspired you to write this article?
Yeah, Brittany, what inspired me is the need
Mm,
uh, for uh, spouses, in particular, betraying spouses, those spouses who have actually been unfaithful
okay.
in some form or fashion, to have direction in the process of beginning to reconnect emotionally
Mm,
with reality.
yeah.
When we are unfaithful, when people are unfaithful, one of the things that you have to do in order to uh, be unfaithful is to start detaching yourself
Okay.
from the reality of what you're doing, not to feel it in its true form or sense. It's almost like reality is there, but you're kind of over here. And so recovery, a significant part of recovery is actually bringing a person back to a place where they can not only acknowledge the facts, meaning what I did, but also feel into the reality of what they did.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could definitely get that sense when I was reading your article. So, when you wrote this
Mhm.
article, was it just for the betraying spouse? Do you think the betrayed spouse could also benefit from reading this, or what was your viewpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. We hope, my counselor online with all of our couples we're working with in infidelity that they would read all the articles.
Mhm.
We don't want anything we're doing, anything we're saying to be in the dark. So if you're a betrayed spouse, I would say read this so you know
Mm,
what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's written in a way that you can understand what we're asking for, what it
okay.
is that your spouse is working on.
No, that makes sense. So in the article, obviously the topic is emotional restitution. That was
Mhm.
a new phrase for me. So what exactly
Sure.
is emotional restitution as regards to infidelity recovery?
Yeah. Well, the first part of it is this idea of being willing, with a lot of courage, to live in reality. And
Okay.
in particular, live in the reality of my spouse's pain and my own pain from my infidelity. That is so significant. That's so important. From what I said earlier, when we're unfaithful, when we're in that place, we're disconnected not only from our spouse in terms of the facts of what's going on, we're also disconnected from them emotionally.
Okay.
And so emotional restitution is having the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to come back and I'm going to work to live in reality. I'm going to work to feel reality, both my own pain and my spouse's pain. That's the very first part of it. And then a second part of it is I want to acknowledge, you know, and allow myself to actually be impacted
Okay.
by the results of my infidelity, and process grief with my spouse. A lot of times when we come out of infidelity, there's so much pain with it. Our natural movement is to get away from what hurts. I
Yeah.
think that's the movement for all of us when it comes to pain because none of us likes to feel pain. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, boy, I hope I hurt today. We don't do that. And so our natural reaction is when something hurts is to step back from it. And that actually, in the case of infidelity and healing, is the complete opposite of what we need to be
Mm,
willing to do. We actually have to steer into the pain. We have to, in a sense, welcome it
okay.
and be willing to feel it rather than fight it. Uh, it's so, so important. So when we are in emotional restitution, we are really, really connecting with the reality and the feelings of what we have done. And then finally, with that, we are engaging in a day to day grieving with our spouse. We're
Mm,
actually willing to be emotionally engaged and help them grieve as we grieve. So it's like the two of us working together. Infidelity divided us. Infidelity happened with us separate. Our healing is going to happen with us feeling together.
mm. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I just love that image of like being together to
Mhm.
heal. Just because I feel like at least what I've learned from, especially from like the MyCounselor.Online community, is that you guys really talk about
Mhm.
just like healing can only happen in relationship. It's how
Mhm.
God designed everyone. So even just healing from this, it makes sense that you'd have to do it together.
Yeah.
So when someone's going through the emotional restitution, is there like, do you take them through like a program? Are there steps they like, is it just like a letter, or is it like, how do they go
Yeah.
through all that?
So we want them to take some time to reflect on and write out a few different aspects of emotional restitution. So it's going to be a written form,
Okay.
something we're writing up, typing out, handwriting out for our spouse. And it's what I'd like to call a working document, meaning it's not something we write out and read and then we're done with, we put it away. It's actually something that helps to guide us as we're going through this grieving process. And there are a number of different areas that we want people to, betraying spouses, to reflect on, to get in touch with. And so I'll kind of break those down a little bit. We can talk back and forth about that. And the first one is taking responsibility. The very first thing we want to do out of the gate is own the infidelity. It's basically to say, I'm responsible for my infidelity. You as my spouse are not.
Mhm.
Now, for a lot of people, that really resonates. They say, yes, of course, that's right. And they say, I've already said that to my spouse. But there's something about saying it again and feeling into that reality with your spouse, because whether you want them to or not, the nature of infidelity is that it creates a lot of insecurity in your spouse. It just does. So when we're willing to go there and say again and again and again, this was me, it was not about you, that's an important first thing that we want to write out, that we want to kind of delve into. And from there, we want to talk about how we deceived our spouse and others. It's so important that we own all the deceit involved in infidelity, because infidelity really happens in secrecy, whether it's pornography, whether it's a relationship with another person. Secrecy, hiding, lying are such a key part of it. And in this, I want us to focus on the way that we deceived, owning and saying out loud, here's how I deceived first myself. Because I'm a big believer, I've heard it said by other experts in infidelity recovery, and I 100% agree that we lie to ourselves first.
Okay.
We lie to ourselves first before we lie to anyone else. And so we own and take time to write out, here's the way that I was lying to myself. Here's the way I was lying to you as my spouse, both directly and indirectly, because we lie through statements that are directly lies, and we also lie through what we leave out. It is lying when we're not honest about what we should be honest about.
Yeah.
I had one spouse the other day say, and this is not uncommon, he didn't really lie to me because I just didn't ask.
Yeah.
And that's always tragic when I hear that, and was able to speak with that spouse and say, that's not true. That's absolutely not true. When we don't tell our spouse the truth, when we don't allow them to see us honestly and fully, we are lying to them. Even if we're not saying something out loud, we can lie by what we withhold.
No, that makes sense. And it kind of goes back into even that statement about just taking full responsibility for the infidelity. Because I think it's easy for the betrayed spouse to probably feel like they weren't perfect. Like, does that come up a lot where people feel like, well, I wasn't perfect. Like, how can they say that was all on them? Like, how do you handle when like those, or even the person who betrayed the other, like they feel like, well, the marriage wasn't perfect. Like, how do you deal with like those kind of objections that kind of can come up to feeling like they need to fully own it?
Absolutely. It's really interesting when we say those kinds of things. We're really kind of deflecting out of our own pain.
Okay.
Because it hurts to take this responsibility. And I'll go so far as to say, with anyone, pointing out your own imperfections or the imperfections of your spouse is true.
Right.
They're not perfect. The marriage is not perfect, but we all are responsible for who we become in the face of our difficulty and pain.
Okay.
Your only option, if I'm talking with a betraying spouse, and with all compassion, because I want to, I'm not here to beat anybody up, but I just say,
Right.
listen, you had other options than to take your pain and become unfaithful.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality. Becoming unfaithful was not your only option. You get to choose who you become in the face of hardship. And to the betrayed spouse who's saying, gosh, I wasn't perfect, I wasn't everything I needed to be, I simply say, that's true. I'm sure on so many levels that that's true. But again, the reality is your spouse always had a choice about what they were going to do and what they were going to become in their pain. And for a betraying spouse, one of the things that is often happening is infidelity leaves you with a tremendous feeling of being out of control.
Okay.
And that's really scary. And so most of the time when you dig under, was it something I did? I wasn't enough. What the person is really saying is, this grief is really painful, and I want to have some sense of control. And they want in that to have a sense of what they can do, or what they had ownership of, to make this not happen again. And so we dig a little bit deeper there. Usually that's what's there. It's this sense, because we all want that. When we're facing pain, we want to have this sense of I can control it somehow. And the reality is, and it's a painful reality, that no, you didn't. You were not able to do something or be something that would stop your spouse from doing what they did.
Yeah, that's really hard. So I know we talked a lot about like that taking responsibility. So do you help the betraying spouse kind of break down like the responsibility they need to take on, or how does that work for them to really kind of
Yeah.
live in that reality you talked about?
Yeah, so we like to break it down in, we have a number of areas that we suggest here. People are not limited to these, but we have some really specific areas that we like people to go through and really take an inventory of. An unfaithful spouse, take an inventory and say, let me look at all these different aspects that I need to take responsibility in. And the first of these is who was harmed.
Okay.
And I would say, harmed is another word for affected. Sometimes we say, well, I don't know if that person was hurt necessarily. I say, listen, let's put down everybody who was harmed and who was affected by what you did.
Yeah.
Because again, we detach from that when we're in our infidelity. It's not going to hurt or harm anyone, or we suspend reality for a while. The second thing is, what's the emotional damage? What did I did? What did my infidelity do emotionally to those around me? Paying really special care to the people closest to me, my spouse, my children, my immediate family. What was the emotional cost of what I did? Physical damage. Sometimes infidelity involves the loss of property or damage. If that's there, list it. Financial damage. There are all kinds of ways there can be financial consequences, from the loss of a job to spending money on the affair or the sexual behavior, to legal issues. What is the financial damage that has been caused? Sexual damage would be another area. When we're unfaithful, it damages our sexual intimacy with our spouse.
Right.
It can create all kinds of different difficulty, from like desiring sex, engaging in it, even enjoying it. And so owning that, looking at how has this impacted my ability to sexually connect with my partner? How's it impacted them? Me, it's done damage there. We encourage people to look at intrapersonal damage. And this is a little bit more in depth. We really encourage our unfaithful spouse to look at how their infidelity may have damaged their spouse's relationship with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The betrayed spouse's relationship to him or herself. What I mean by that, an example of that would be, have a spouse who's been betrayed come in and say, I've never felt insecure or lacking before. And now all of a sudden I have this different relationship with myself where I'm really doubting me, or I really feel self-conscious. There's been damage done in their relationship and their understanding of themselves. It can also cause them to begin to view some positive qualities about themselves with disgust or disdain. I can't tell you how many spouses who've told me, and it's true, they say, I was very trusting and I really tended to believe the best in my mate. And that, boy, that was, what kind of fool am I? And that's always really, really sad, because what's happened there, those are really good and compassionate qualities in them, where they were open and connected with their mate. And because of their mate's infidelity, they're now looking at those good qualities about them as a weakness or as foolishness. And they're not. So we look at some of those things, you really sit with intrapersonally inside of our mate. What does that do to them? And then finally, interpersonal damage. What has your infidelity done in relation to both you and your spouse's connections with others?
Yeah.
It changes the dynamics of, where we can go to church sometimes. It changes dynamics of where we can have a job. It sometimes is in the form of, we have this thing that we're dealing with, but we can't tell everybody. So our spouse is carrying around this big secret, in a sense. They're carrying around this sense of, there's this big elephant, I can't tell anybody.
Yeah.
So it does incredible damage there. So that's not a conclusive list. That's not everything that we could put there, but those are a number of areas we ask people to consider.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this one section about like the letter, like really meeting the spouse in their pain. Why do you feel like that's such a big like struggle for the betraying spouse, is to feel like they're to like really relate to their spouse's pain when they're going through it?
The block is not actually their spouse's pain, it's their own.
Oh, okay.
It's not actually about connecting with their spouse's pain, it's actually about feeling their own pain. The way that our nervous systems are wired is we are designed to need to feel into our core emotions. We're designed to need to drop down and feel deeply, especially about things that are where there's been pain. And what happens if I have the two people here, when your spouse who's hurt, the betrayed spouse, when they're hurting and they drop into their pain, what happens, if we'll allow it, is it will cause the betraying spouse to drop into theirs. That's how your nervous system is wired. When people drop, they drop, cause each other to drop.
I see.
Okay. And that creates distress. That creates a problem inside the betraying spouse, because feeling into this pain really hurts. So what do they try to do? They try to stay up here. So the nice version, of this is to say, okay, I'll be here for you as my betrayed spouse. You can drop, but I'll stay right here and just know that I'm hearing you and listening to you. And for a betraying spouse or betrayed spouse, this is really painful. This is like nails on a chalkboard. Don't do this to me. If you're not going to go here with me, don't watch me be vulnerable.
That makes sense.
I don't need that from you. Like, that doesn't feel good. It feels like me being vulnerable and you're still not vulnerable. I don't want that. Okay. The not so nice version of that is and this can happen with a betraying spouse, where they're angry or upset with their spouse for feeling. And they're like, listen, don't drop like that. Don't feel it. Don't go there. We don't need to do that. You're dragging this out. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Come up here with me. And we'll both live up where we don't feel into this. And so what we want to be able to do, and the obstacle here really and truly, is to get the betraying spouse to be willing to feel what they feel. And out of feeling what we feel, And this is really important for us because a lot of times people say, a betraying spouse will say, listen, I don't have a right to feel what I feel. It doesn't matter what I feel. I need to be here for my spouse. And I say, listen, the only way for you to be there with them is to be connected with what you feel. It's the only way. The only way for you to actually have true and deep compassion for them, believe it or not, is actually to feel what you feel. That's the only way. And so it runs a little counterintuitive for them because they think, I just need to hear what their pain. I just need to be with them. It's not true. You need to feel into your pain, because when you feel into your pain, you can actually connect with and hold theirs.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that's an incredible struggle for someone to really connect with that when there's a lot, shame, just disappointment in themselves, or even just, a lot of things that our body wants to naturally protect. We really have to fight that. So it's really amazing that, there are counselors like you that really can sit with people and have like such a deep, like well of like compassion and empathy and just like acknowledgement, and like it's like such a safe place for someone to really go there and know it's okay to go there. So I'm like really grateful for the work that you guys do. Sorry, my throat's getting a little caught up. I really liked the idea at the end of the letter. It says to close with thankfulness. Like, why do you think that's such an important part of like closing the letter that way?
Because the willingness to engage in recovery with you is a gift. The willingness to heal is an extraordinary gift. I believe very strongly that recovery can yield greater healing, more growth that just far outweighs the pain and the hurt. And so in that way, to express that, to go, wow, what a gift for us to be able to do this together. What a gift for us to be able to heal together. We need to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge that for a spouse who has betrayed. We need to acknowledge that. We need to own that and go, you know what, this is so important. This is so important. This is a gift that you're giving me to be able to walk this road with you, and it's going to help both of us heal. And that helps us to have perspective, because this is going to be hard.
Yeah.
This is going to be hard. It's so worth it, but it's going to be hard. And so you need to anchor yourself in the reality of thankfulness and go, even though this heart is hard, I'm so thankful for this hard.
And then I know
so thankful for it.
Yeah. And then I also saw in there, it says like you actually asked the betraying spouse to not ask for forgiveness at the end of their letter. Why is that so important for them to not kind of go there?
Because forgiveness, when we say, I'm sorry, or please forgive me, what we're essentially saying, we don't necessarily maybe mean to, but what we're saying is, I'm going to give you something as the person hurting, who I betrayed, I'm going to give you something to do now. I'm going to give you something to do, and you need to do that. And asking for forgiveness and I'm sorry doesn't give them the room to feel their grief. It doesn't give them the room and the time to be really angry and really hurt. And that's what they need. That's what they need to be able to forgive you. And so we don't ask for that. We actually, one of the most loving things we can do is, I'll feel with you. I'll feel what I feel. I'll feel with you. And we're gonna grieve this together. And there's space for that. That's not being unforgiving. That's not being bitter. That's actually what it takes to heal from a really, really deep injury.
No, that makes sense. So what final piece of advice would you give to couples who are watching this, maybe going through it, or maybe considering starting counseling for infidelity recovery?
I think the thing that I want to say to people is it's worth it. It is so worth it. It is there's I'm not going to say it's easy, but oh my goodness, the benefits so far outweigh any of the pain. And you say, Shaun, that's crazy. I'll just say, no, it's true. It's 100% true. So I just want to encourage, those who are listening who say, gosh, I couldn't feel my pain, or that I can't even imagine that feeling better. I just want to encourage you. It's absolutely true that you can and will heal, and it'll be great.